Hey everyone! A lot has changed since the last KingSlayer devlog had taken the internet by storm, so let's just jump right into it. In this devlog, I'll go over how I created the bow and arrow mechanic for the game, as well as the full body tracking, which was then reduced to just full headset tracking with the torso and floating hands. First of all, however, the Unity XR plugin has finally reached version 1.0! Woohoo! And with that came a lot of new functionality and a bunch of changes. This meant scrapping out custom movement and hand interaction systems and replacing them with these awesome scripts that take care of everything for me, without having to worry that it's all running on some shady code that was mostly inspired by Stack Overflow and the Unity forums. There are also a lot of code changes and deprecations, but that didn't really concern me since I've more or less just thrown away all the VR stuff that I've written, since the stuff you now get with the Unity XR toolkit is so much more superior to anything that I could have ever written myself. Okay, that's it for the update for the changes that Unity has made since my last devlog. Now for the changes that I have made since my last devlog. The bow mechanic. Do you like my beard, by the way? Been growing it for the past 6 months. I thought that since I've bought all of the 3D models currently being used for the game, I should at least try to create some assets of my own to give the game sort of like an original aesthetics a little bit. And what better item to start with than one you will be using most throughout the gameplay: the bow and the arrow. Also, what simpler item to model can you think of than a bow, honestly? After going through like half of Grant Abbott's beginner series on how to model stuff in Blender, I decided I'm no longer a beginner and hence shouldn't be watching a series for beginners, as it is just a big waste of time at this point. And so, feeling prepared and ready, I went to Blender and started modeling. The bow went through a couple of iterations, as you can see, but finally I decided on this very simple medieval looking wooden one, which, after adding some materials to it, feels like it fits the rest of the aesthetics pretty well. Looking at the model both in Blender and in Unity, I was only reassured that I made the right choice by not continuing the Grant Abbott series for beginners. Link in the description, by the way. It's the best way to get into Blender, hands down. And while I was in the flow of creating these amazing assets, I threw in an arrow as well, just for the heck of it. Now you might be thinking, how am I supposed to shoot out an arrow out of a bow with no string? Well, if you were thinking that, then congratulations, you have just played yourself. And if there's one thing you should never do, it's to play yourself. The string is of course the most important part of the bow, and that is why I took a much more sophisticated and advanced way of achieving that. I replaced the 3D model with the string renderer. That way, we can have the renderer render the string in all states between being pulled back completely to just resting in an arrow state, by simply assigning a beginning, end, and a middle point, which will be moving together with the hand that's holding the arrow. There's a really good bow and arrow sample project out there made by Unity themselves, which you can go download and play around with. And it is mostly how I did this whole bow mechanic myself. The guy who worked on this project for Unity also happens to have a YouTube channel of his own, and had recently released a bow and arrow series about how they achieve most of the mechanics presented in the sample project, so I'll link both of them in the description if you're interested. They are both amazing, and I would not have finished this bow mechanic without them. With both the bow and arrow modeling being done, it was time to make them functional. With the help of the aforementioned resources, I essentially did the following. Made the bow an XR grabbable object that you can interact with through the trigger collider at the front of it, while also being able to grab the so-called notch object that is resting in the middle of the string, which is also an interactable that you can grab via a trigger collider. That notch object also doubles as a resting place for an arrow object. Based on how far you pull the string, upon release, a certain velocity will be applied to the arrow, which will in turn get released. This all sounds very simple to an educated and smart person like yourself, but when someone like me has to do this, well, all of the following can happen. The arrow being mounted in weird rotations, which was in the end a very simple mistake, where I was manipulating incorrect axes when handling the arrow, in combination with the model being spawned into the world, rotated in a different way than I thought. This bug where the arrow shoots up in the y-axis of the bow rather than the z was once again me applying force in an incorrect direction in my code. You might notice in this clip that the arrow never actually changes its rotation when being released, so even when it's supposed to be falling towards the ground face down, it is making that journey parallel to the ground. That was an easy fix with the function here. There was also the issue where when trying to hold the bow and mount the arrow and shoot it, all in one smooth motion, the bow would randomly start jumping between the left and the right hand, with the arrow either doing the same or just falling to the ground. After spending many hours on this issue, I discovered that the select action trigger on the direct interactors must be set to this state and not this state, and that fixed it. Unfortunately, now you cannot get the arrow, mount it, pull it, and release it all in one swift motion, so I'll still need to do some more work on it. I also noticed that I made the arrow a bit too short, but luckily that is an issue that's easily fixable inside of Unity itself. Unlike other things that were made short and that aren't as easily fixed. Oh, and I also made it so that you can grab the arrow from a quiver that's resting on your back. After I was done with the bow stuff, I decided to implement full body tracking, since the aim of the game is to shoot down your enemy, and in order to be able to do that, you need somewhere to shoot him, other than maybe a floating head and floating hands, which is not ideal. At this stage, my inability to create good looking models of my own turned out to be an issue. I decided to use one of those models that I bought, but that came with a need to rig them as well. I did think I would be totally fine with just cheating and rigging the hand and headset movement to a character that's already rigged that I can get on the asset store for free, and then just reassigning the mesh renderer to the model of a knight that I already have in possession. But it turns out that it's not as simple as that. This caused such issues that at one point I even tried to go into Blender and create my own rig skeleton, but since that would mean I would have to do actual work and actually learn how to do stuff, instead I went on a googling spree, and because fortune favors the lazy, I found this thread online on one of the Unity forums where a literal god selflessly gave away a piece of code that takes care of my entire problem by reassigning the bone ordering so that it fits any humanoid 3D model. With gratitude, I started reading through the code, making sure that I understand everything that's going on to be able to implement this myself. I can't thank this person enough because, as you can see, this worked perfectly. I'll leave a link to it in the description as well. Unfortunately though, since I am a dumbass, there were many more issues waiting on me down the line. I somehow managed to link the skeleton in such a way that my headset movements were being recorded in reverse, so if I moved my head up, the head of my model would look down. If I looked left, it would look right, etc, etc. Also, by cheating like that, the head bone turned out to be way too far at the back, so when looking through the headset, you would see the inside of the helmet, and when I was trying to offset this, it just screwed up the whole tracking, so that if you look down, your whole body would just shoot up and float like 2 meters high. Nothing a couple of hours of tweaking and code reviews couldn't fix though. In the end, I had a fully functional VR body to follow me in 3D space. That was just one thing I had forgotten. The hands. The hands of the model are stuck in a position where all the fingers are glued together and cannot be animated. Oh god, all this work, and now I'll need to redo everything with a different model. But first, I need to find a model that would have open hands so that I can rig fingers to it and then map them to the animators of my current hands, which are just the Oculus hands. But all the models are super expensive and don't fit the aesthetics of the game at all. And in the end, I had a fully functional VR body to follow me in 3D space. But because I thought having the ability to shoot or be shot in the legs, which you have no way of moving other than moving your whole body, which would feel very unnatural and unintuitive, I just scaled them to 0 and thus removed them from the game. And I did the same to the arms and hands, since it didn't feel fair leaving in the upper limbs while the lower limbs had been executed. Just didn't feel right, you know? Once the body was done, I attached the bow to the player's back and made it so that it gets reattached anytime it's not being used. That way, we don't have to worry about what happens to it when the player accidentally lets go of it, and as a bonus, we also don't need to worry about adding physics to it so that it doesn't just awkwardly float there in front of your eyes. This somehow proved to be problematic as well, which I'm sure could only have happened to someone like me. But the string was for some reason not following the bow to the points I've told it to follow, which of course in the end turned out to just be a flaw in my code where I was trying to check whether the bow is being held in a completely incorrect way. But that still somehow managed to set me back 2 hours of development. Thanks very much, past me. Very, very cool. As some last touches, I made it so that you cannot accidentally grab the string of the bow when reaching for the bow itself while it sits on your back, and also added a quiver model to the quiver object from which you are now able to pull the arrows. I also found out that there is a bug with the Unity XR toolkit. What? Oh, I know, I'm as surprised and shocked as you are, believe me. Which was causing the movement of this boat to be really jittery, which I fixed by changing its movement from kinematic to instantaneous. I also created a button which is physics based and can be pushed by any object with the collider, which of course our virtual hands do not yet have. So as of now, you need to use an item like, say, the tip of an arrow. But the point is, once I create physics-based hands with a collider and all that, we will be able to push the buttons and recruit or spawn soldiers and send them to attack the enemy castle. And that's about it for this devlog. I know that since the last devlog came out like half a year ago, I should have more to show for it, but unfortunately, I use most of my spare time to play video games or skate like a total cool and edgy bad boy, which leaves little time for game dev and video making, for which I am deeply apologetic. Okay, bye!